Scott did not tell the cast and crew that was what was going to happen.
Oh,
so people
it's even worse.
People didn't know that something was going to pop out of his chest. They knew it was something going on because obviously Hurt's like throwing himself around and stuff, and they're responding to a medical emergency. Then he lays down and he's rigged up, and the thing like pops out of his chest, and apparently that reaction is also genuine because no one knew that was actually gonna show up. Hello, welcome to the HolmFront. I am Tyler, your host, and to my right, as always, is Mitch, my overly artistic friend. I forgot in the intro we're going to try and say something about being objectively subjective, but it's not going to work out this time, so we're just going to keep going.
You just went over rehearsing it with me, and then you forgot.
Welcome to the HolmFront, where we try to keep things objectively subjective. How about that?
Hey,
all right, take two.
There it is.
I'll just cut. Maybe. We'll see.
Just leave it. It's fun.
Okay, so we have seen this movie before, but we just recently rewatched the movie. What did we see?
We watched Alien.
We did, the 1979 film by Ridley Scott. And I figured, what better time just recently watching Blade Runner? Just try and keep the theme. We'll just try and keep the theme.
Yeah, that was the original intent, was that we would watch Blade Runner and Alien because they're connected in universe, which is what you mistakenly believed.
At least that was the claim, yeah. I was incorrect, but I mean, it doesn't...
More that the public... It's not your fault, though. Lots of people have been duped by that because people really, really, really want them to be. I mean, it does kind of make sense that they would be.
They've got inspirations from Philip K. Dick, so I mean...
Both take place in the future, both have androids.
Both kind of deal with similar concepts of life, and anyway.
Yeah.
So, given that, let's jump into the film. Like I said, 1979.
So they're not connected.
They're not connected, officially, unfortunately. I think they make references to each other for some of the companies and stuff, and the android themes in it.
There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, and it seems like he was leaning that way more with Prometheus and Covenant, but for this one, there is no connection. So,
so let it go.
So we're gonna let it go. No more theorizing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna start with what your interpretation of the film is. So I'm gonna throw it to you first. What is your interpretation of the Alien 1979 film by Ridley Scott?
Well, speaking of movies being like other movies, I have an interpretation that I think it's going to take me a minute to get there because it's kind of one of those movies that it doesn't scream to me like it has this predominant theme that it wants to like beat over my head. It's like a really well-crafted horror movie about survival. That's pretty much what it boils down to. And survival, I think, shouldn't... I'm saying that kind of lightly, but it shouldn't be taken that way because every piece of art is going to go back to that important key of survival, or at least there's an argument to be made that it does, that it's intrinsically linked with it. I did a whole philosophy class that was talking about that very subject. It was really interesting about how like that's like, because it's like part of living is you need the will to live, and so like art helps facilitate and cultivate and protect that. So that's kind of like, that's like one surface level way to read this movie. But I kind of think it's very interesting if I take a step back and go to my favorite topic, the Oscars, and see its Oscar race.
Okay.
Because this movie got 2 nominations for visual effects and production design, and it won production design, which went to the artist. Did it go to the H.R. Giger? Did it go to him or no?
No, it was the other guy for the production design.
Because he would have been the concept artist. Okay, so not him.
Well, I think Geiger actually... I'm just going to say Geiger because it sounds less weird than Giger, but...
You're the one who was just telling me the proper way to say it.
Apparently, that's how they were saying in the documentary. I don't know. They say Giger, which is weird, so I'm going to say Geiger. But apparently he had...
Like a normal person?
He was fundamental in creating the alien himself. That's what I understand. But the rest of the set design and stuff, I think he was doing conceptual art. But I
would assume, especially for the alien ship,
right?
In particular, yeah. So, anyways, those are the only 2 nominations it received. The only one it won was the visual effects, and that seems a little bit odd to me. But it is very much on brand for the Oscars to completely miss when an important horror picture has come around.
Sure,
I am going somewhere with this, though. I promise. So here's the thing: like, if they were tapping into it a little bit more, it is totally on brand for the things that they were interested in at the time. You look at a lot of the Best Picture winners, like The Deer Hunter, or even a lot of the nominees, like Apocalypse Now, which was the same year as was Kramer versus Kramer. And even the following year was Ordinary People. So there were a lot of films in that era that were talking about either Vietnam or discussing the sort of fracturing of the family unit, because that was happening in the 70s, and the sort of dividing lines that were being drawn, and this fear of what was to come. It just seemed like no one really knew what the future was going to look like. There's like a really interesting analysis that some people have made about how Ordinary People is really more representative of that than the actual themes. Like, it's a movie in and of itself, but it's also like representative of that larger message. And I find that that's an interesting way to look at Oscar films. And so this movie, if I try to take that lens and apply it to it, I do think it works. You could very much just assume or project that the alien is Vietnam. Not necessarily the culture or the people in any way, but in terms of the kind of unpredictability of the warfare and the horrific nature of not really being prepared of what you go in against, right? And then being so shocked at how awful it was, which I've done some reading from Vietnam veterans. That does seem like it would be an apt description. So if that's the case, then you would think that, okay, well, it's just a symbolic representation of it. Why wouldn't they pick up on that? And it's because there's this other facet of the film that's very fascinating as well. And it's that it sort of initially comes across as like a B horror picture from the time, of which was prevalent everywhere.
Sure.
And in fact, I would think that if you're going to be on a horror movie from that time, like if I was an actor, I would just assume that it's going to be a B.
I think most of them did. Yeah, they were kind of just assuming that this is going to be a low budget kind of B campy horror movie, but it was a job, so they were just kind of going into it with that knowledge. But obviously, it ended up being something a whole lot more.
Right, and I think the Oscars can really miss when a horror picture is like that, and I don't know why that is necessarily, other than that maybe there's just horror is such a prolific genre. It's sometimes hard to parse through and be like, well, this is the best horror. This one actually is a much more thoughtful, deeper, artistic, execution that the others, like, it's a cut above the others. And like, how do we decide to like give it to this one as opposed to not some other? So it's always this like uncertain territory. But I think in that, to go along with that, it's almost like if they had the hindsight of 2020 vision, I feel like they would have put it in for a lot more. It probably wouldn't win Best Picture because it is a horror picture.
See.
But I do think in hindsight, they would be like, yeah, okay, because now they have the proof, because the film has inspired just so much. I mean, Metroid, Halo, there was even a more recent game called Scorn that had an art direction very, very similar to this.
Oh, yeah, that was a super Geiger-inspired one. That's right.
Yeah.
By the way, Geiger, I hope that guy got some therapy. He's got some messed up stuff. But
talk about that.
I'm good. just look up HR Geiger. You'll see it.
Well, okay, so I mean that is poking up on a point of what makes this film somewhat difficult to watch, because it is just disgusting. Like what the alien does and the process of what it goes through is just absolutely, I mean, to its nature, it's horrific. But I found that when I was watching it for, this review, I was like, okay, there's two things that are really standing out to me. One is that it's really, really like, it's not overly concerned about giving you what you came in to see, which I think is admirable. Okay. Like the opening shots of the movie is just like interior shots of the ship, and then there's like a log, and there's like they're waking up from cryosleep. Like nothing's happening. Like this is the slowest, most boring start to any movie ever, right?
Which is interesting because I noticed that they tried shot for shot to emulate that scene in the Alien Earth show.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is like really similar.
Yeah.
Because they do the whole like weird fade in, fade outs, people climbing out of the cryopods. Like, why do we need to get this close?
Yeah.
I think it's just because they're not creative enough to stand on their 2 feet. But for this film, the original, it was just trying to set, like, we've talked about this before, how Ridley has this kind of roller coaster pace where he does this long incline and it takes a while. But it's constantly building to something, and then you crest. And at whatever point you crest, you're just at a downhill ride the whole rest of the film. And I think he kind of started it with this one.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it does that thing where you're like, is anything going on? Like, it's engaging, but not, you know, you haven't seen anything yet. And then it hits a point, and then you just like, you start going down the rest of the film.
It's funny you mentioned that, because at 55 minutes in, which is exactly the halfway mark of this movie, that is when it crests and you hit the climax. It's the chest burster scene, because that is what sets in motion the rest. Because everything before that point, you're just like, well, this is gross and weird and disturbing, and I don't know what's going on, but maybe it'll be fine. And you get this weird naivete that he lets you build up, and because the characters do the same thing.
Yeah.
And then when that scene happens, it's like, nope, that was bad. That was horrible. And then after that, it's like that roller coaster where it's just downhill, and that's when people start dying, and that's when they're slowly ramping up. Like, we have to adapt. So that is a good point. Like, Scott is actually very, very good about escalation.
Yes.
He's extremely just intelligent with how he goes about that, because you're right, just slowest, most generic start ever, and then to find out where you're actually going, because the film can kind of teeter as what I was observing. I was like, I feel like this could go either way. Like, this is interesting and engaging. I don't really know why though. And I feel like, you know, it's showing its age a little bit, such that I could see people at the time being like, okay, this isn't that impressive yet. And then there's like that creature thing that latches on to John Hurt's character, and you're like, oh God, what was that? And then it starts to, you know, unravel what's going on, and then that intrigue really instills in you.
Right.
And then there's the horror element that goes with it. So it really comes full circle.
I like that it plays on those expectations, because they had that ability of like, well, this is what people expect. This is what people normally see. So we'll allow them to kind of settle into that comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but they do that in multiple facets of the film. So one of the scenes that I recall is before the chest burster scene, you know, he gets the face hugger.
Yeah.
He's laying there. They can't figure out what to do. They try and do something about it, and it like releases the acid blood and it burns through the hole and stuff. So they leave it alone because they're like, what else can we possibly do? We're going to kill him. So like, we might as well just let this play out. And one of the guys keeps going, we should just freeze him, man. We should just put him back in the crowd. Like, you idiot. You know, what's that going to do? So
actually, that's on point though, because they don't like the cold, right? Can't you freeze him?
I suppose that would have done something. Yeah, if they just put him in cryo or frozen or something. But they expand that later. I mean, they didn't really expand that in this film. But the facehugger releases naturally. And then everybody just kind of settles into like, oh, well, it's over. Thank God. Let's just go eat. Let's go hang out and do something. Like, why not? We're fine, right?
Yeah, they don't put him back in the scanner.
Right.
Check.
They're not like,
see if he's
maybe
okay.
we should check his vitals. Maybe we should like figure out if something else is wrong.
Uh-huh.
This thing was like attached to his face for hours. Like, what? Maybe he got, you know, some kind of alien virus or something. We don't know. They're like, let's just, it doesn't matter.
Well, to be fair, when they do ask him, they're like, how are you feeling? And he has this moment where he's like, oh, I had this horrible dream. Right. And then he pivots away from it real hard. Yeah. He's just like, oh, well, but you know, I don't want to think about that. That was just awful. And they're like, okay.
You got something when we did was that our first video? No, Spider-Man was first. I think this was our second. When we did Prometheus and Covenant, that episode, you explained to me why they had it the way they had it in that film. And it was like this depiction of men going through rape, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost the same kind of psychological effect, because he doesn't want to remember or relive that experience. But he's just like pushing it back. He's just like, just push it under the rug. Let's go eat. Let's go do anything else and not remember this thing that happened to me.
It's like equally a rape victim response as much as it is a guy's response to that.
I suppose, yeah, it's kind of playing into both.
Weird.
But it also plays into these other things. So one of the things that they do, and I think they were into at least casting, if not into filming, when they decided that they were going to establish the female character as a lead. And that was something that I forget he was the liaison between Fox and the production crew. His name is Alan Ladd Jr. He worked on films like Star Wars and Blade Runner. But he was a pretty prominent voice for a lot of these guys. So, you know, most of these filmmakers like Ridley Scott, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, they all were like in that circle with this guy. he was one of the few that got Star Wars to be made. And so he was the one that brought up, he's like, well, why don't we do a female lead? He's like, this isn't something that's often done in this type of movie, of this type of picture. So he just kind of threw it out there, and the guys ran with it. And one of the things we discussed in the Prometheus episode was that they don't really establish a main character until it kind of boils down to her.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of process of elimination to figure out who's who. Mm-hmm. But they do establish that she seems to be the most competent character. But at the time, in 1979, most people are going to feel, because they originally wrote this for an all-male cast.
Okay.
And so I think that they were assuming that this would just be what you would assume would make it in this type of environment, would be a man. And so I think they played on that assumption to be like, well, most people are going to believe that the female characters are going to be killed off anyway. And so when all the male characters are being killed off, I think it's adding to that unsettling vibe of the movie. Because most people are like, well, shoot, who's actually going to make it? And then it ends up being Sigourney Weaver, who you do realize and acknowledge is the most competent character, but I think with people's presuppositions at the time, they weren't assuming that that was going to be the case.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, they also do a good job of kind of divvying up like the attention. You very much feel like a fly on the wall just watching these people go about their day and do their job. And because of that, you don't really get attached to anyone in particular. You're just sort of feel like you're one of them. And like you're just in the environment with them. So it's very immersive in that way, which I think is
my favorite word, and your favorite word too. Yeah, so I was paying attention to that. I had that in mind as I was watching it this time, and I was like, oh, you do really just feel like they're just dropping you into this environment. And there's other elements too that do that. And one of which they add these layers into the film that clearly have a lot more depth than the movie allows to expand. Mm-hmm. Namely, you see the space jockey and everything that has to go with that. This world, this alien planet that they land on. There's like this facility with all these eggs and stuff. And then there's a facehugger that incubates the human that creates the alien.
Then the corporation actually knows what this is.
Well, they know that there's life out there, and then there's the android that deals with. So there's all these things that like are part of the narrative that they don't expand on, but they don't feel a need to. But it gives this like B horror film that much more depth, and more capability to expand. Which I think is why it has so many other films, is they're trying to expand on any number of those elements that are in there.
I see.
But with that classification, what was your like synopsis of the interpretation that you brought from this film?
Oh yeah, it's one I'd heard before, and it's basically like the idea is it's essentially doing a gender swap of like the horrors of rape and birth. And so it has it because I mean that's essentially what the creature does, but it targets a male character, and that's the idea, is that there should be some kind of psychological ramification for that, because like men don't go through that process. So this film forces them to, but in this like really disturbing, gross way, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like it's a very feminist piece, I guess you could say, in that regard, because it's trying to weigh the balances. And so it does actually make a lot of sense, to its credit, to have Sigourney Weaver kind of rise to the top as the only survivor, because it's like women can survive childbirth, men can't.
That's the primary point.
I mean, there's a better way to say that, but
I'm sure. Yeah, there's a couple of nuances in that argument, I think, that need to be addressed. But yeah, I was listening to the writer talk about it, Dan O'Bannon. Yeah, Dan O'Bannon. He was saying he was like, I was writing it with somebody else, so it was kind of bouncing back and forth ideas with, and he's like, I woke up at like 3 a.m, and I just had this idea. It was like, what if the alien incubates one of the characters, and that's how the alien's made? It's like, what if these facehugger things like can implant eggs? Like, oh, that's horrible. Yeah, let's do it. And then they stayed up for the rest of the night, like writing this horrible thing.
Nasty. I'm in.
Yeah, gross. Yeah. Let's do that. But I find it interesting, this, like, we talked about this kind of amorphous embodiment that the alien takes, because at first, you see the space jockey, so you get some kind of idea of other life,
Mm-hmm.
And then John Hurt's character finds the eggs, and then the egg opens up and you get the facehugger. The facehugger jumps on him, and it creates a whole new form that you haven't seen in the whole movie yet. So you see all these things that you don't know how they correlate. You just know that they're all things that aren't human that they've got to deal with and wrestle with. So my interpretation of it was just kind of like the fear of the unknown, but they're embodying it by making even the threat in the film, like I said, amorphous. Like, you definitely do have the xenomorph at the end, but there's so many other factors in there that they include, including the corporation and the android, which might have some kind of external commentary on like corporatism or capitalism or something. I'm not actually sure. Like, I haven't delved that
dystopic
deep.
Futures.
So yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But that brings up so many other topics or like presuppositions that like there's a corporation that builds androids. Like people didn't know that this was an android that was among them. So not only
I think that's really interesting, the fact that they're manipulated into thinking
Right.
one of their crewmates is just a regular person when he's not.
Yep. Yeah, and that was a whole factor that wasn't important it was important in the film, but it wasn't like the main focus of it.
Yeah.
When it feels like that could have been its own film altogether, but it was just like, this is just part of it.
He could have just been a corporate shill.
Sure.
And instead they made it an android. But I think that adds to the horror element, because the fact that he's an android means that he's disposable in a way that humans wouldn't be necessarily.
Right.
So the corporation knew the dangers and was like, all right, well, we'll send our unit to be an android, but everybody else, who cares about them? So the fact that the corporation didn't have like one of their own, quote unquote, to actually be physically present and be like, presumably you would want them to make it back.
Well, they're too important. We don't want to get rid of our own people.
Right.
So we'll just get rid of something that's expendable, essentially.
Right. So then
Along
it
with the expendable people.
it brings down the value of the characters of like how little there's concern for them, which makes it feel like they're that much alone. Like if they get killed by this thing, too bad. So, form a union.
That's the real purpose of this. That was the other kind of theme, I guess, that was prevalent, was isolation.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the things I was curious, I couldn't find it out officially, but I was curious if they derived inspiration from the original Dracula, because now we have the lens of a couple of films and adaptations of that being made, one of which I actually enjoyed, which I think was like 2 or 3 years old, and it was the Last Voyage of the Demeter. And so in the book Dracula, it mentions the ship that washes ashore that's empty. And that's presumably where Dracula comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I think as Universal came up with the film idea, it was like, well, what if we actually filmed a movie about the story of the ship? And so that kind of embodies the same concept of like, there's a crew that's on a ship and they can't escape and they're stuck with a monster. So there's kind of this dichotomous relationship of tension of there's no escape for the crewmates, but also there's no escape for the monster. So the monster can only be so selective in how many he kills before it becomes an issue of his own survival. And it was similar in this film of like, they're on this ship and so is the xenomorph, but the xenomorph is intelligent enough to know if I get rid of all these crewmates, I'm stuck in space too. So I can't kill everybody. So like, they've got to kind of figure out this balance of like, it's survival because it's being hunted by the crewmates. And also the fact that it's got to survive by keeping these crewmates alive. And so it's an interesting, it felt very direct just from the like 2 or 3 sentences that Dracula brings up. But
what made you think the xenomorph was intelligent enough to recognize that it needed someone to stay alive? Are you saying because it goes to the ship, the shuttle?
Yeah, primarily that, because it kills everybody else. And it seems like it's even hunting a couple of them. But at the end, it doesn't attack Ripley. It hides onto her shuttle when it gets launched off. So it's almost like it knows that she's trying to escape the ship, and it recognizes the situation is dire on the ship, the Nostromo's. And so it, jettisons off with her and doesn't kill her. It doesn't hunt her down. It doesn't kill her. And even when they're trapped on the shuttle together, it doesn't do anything. It was like hibernating or sleeping or something. But
yeah,
it doesn't recognize her as a threat, because it also does the same thing with the cat. Doesn't kill it for some reason. So it's not just out to kill a bunch of stuff. So it has some level of reasoning.
Yeah.
But that would be my assumption based on the themes of the film, is where I kind of led that. But that was my primary reason for believing.
I see. Because not to dispel the theory, but
Please
it
do.
could have just been that the shuttle was less noisy because the environment was like wah, 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 psh, and it's blowing like steam out the out the doors or the rooms. But so it could have just been like, well, I just don't want to be in this environment, so then it goes there. And when it's killing them off, if it's making any kind of threat level of assessment, which I would assume a predator would have to do, then it may not necessarily. It might assess the threat level of the cat and be like, all right, well, that's not really a problem, so I'll just ignore it. Versus like something else that like, yeah, that seems like something that could hurt me, so I'll kill it. And then, it just gets tired and it just wants to rest when it's on the show. But
sure.
I think the reason I bring that up is I think it works either way. And that's part of the genius of the film is that it allows all that ambiguity to exist. So you can sit there and question like how much intelligence does it have to think through this stuff. And that kind of feeds into the fear because it's very good about getting your imagination going. Like the scene where the alien comes out of the egg and like latches onto John Hurt's face.
Yeah.
When he has the mask and everything and it's like melting the shield with its acid or whatever. When that happens, it's like a couple of really fast cuts and you're like, ugh. And then it cuts away and it just shows the ship that they were on and like the storm outside on the planet. And then it just sits there for a little bit. And so
it's just Ridley being like, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get
like
there.
So you saw something like really terrifying, but you didn't really get a clean picture of what that means or what it was or like where did it stop? Like you saw how it started, but like did it just kill him or is he still around or what happens to everybody else?
Sure.
You're full of lots of questions. So he gives you this shot to let you just sit there and have a think on it. And that's what great art does, is where it gives you a place for your imagination to start cooking up your own conclusions and assessments of things, right?
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that you bring up about like the Vietnam situation, the breakdown of the family unit, that kind of thing. Because these are things that you can kind of interpret into the film. They may or may not have been intentionally placed in there, but it might have been something that was influencing the writer as he was going. Because, I mean, even with, like, as blatant as this one is, like, even with the rape themes, that's something that affects his psyche to where that's what he's putting into his piece.
Right.
So, but even with that, he's intelligent enough or skilled enough to make the piece interpretive to have multiple angles through which you can view it. So the ones that are blatant enough you're going to get, but other ones that are more subtle or more subjective, like you can kind of input whatever it is that you'd like in there. Mm-hmm. But they are inspired by people like Philip K. Dick or H.P. Lovecraft. People that kind of go with these themes of like they're heavily philosophical. They're very much like wanting to explore things they don't understand. Mm-hmm. Or want to pose questions of like, what is it going to look like in the future? Philip K. Dick is famously wanting to put life into automata and like hyper focusing on creation. And like this obviously has a lot of those themes. And then you have like Lovecraft, who's just fear of the unknown, he fears what he doesn't understand. And there's a lot you don't understand when it comes to space. And so when you embody that and make it as horrifying as it can be, right. That just automatically makes a horror movie, but it also opens up a lot of those avenues of like, well, what could be out there? And so they provide a couple of levels to embody that, the face huggers and all that kind of stuff, and makes it very interesting. But it was cool too that they left a bunch of avenues open to create multiple other pieces, like, making further Alien films or the Blade Runner film that came later, and then potentially merging the two because of their similar themes, because it left enough of a playing field or a foundation for that to exist. Mm-hmm. Is interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's not to say, because I agree with you, it's not like I think it is representative of like the Vietnam War necessarily. Right?
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but that's interpretive, right?
Right, yeah. I was just saying that if you wanted to project that onto it, given the time period and that it's reasonable to assume that the author, anybody from that time period, would have had some exposure to that conflict, regardless of, how they felt about it or what their level of participation. They would have been exposed to it in some way. And so it's now like an association of the time. It's also just like a style that is also prevalent for the time as well. So for example, like another movie, like in more contemporary times, Don't Look Up, it's a movie about environmentalism, but it's very obvious that is the reference point. of what it wants to talk about. And that's very indicative of how we make a lot of our art now, where like things that are meant to be a reference or a commentary or something, we make it very clear so that someone knows that's what we're really ultimately talking about. And, you know, sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not. I think in a lot of places that it isn't, is that people feel like, well, now you sort of deprived me of the opportunity to do my own reading of what might be interesting about this.
Sure.
When you tell me that this is about environmentalism or something, like, so if they had gone into Alien and said to themselves, well, this is going to be representative of the Vietnam War, it probably would be different. There would be a number of nuanced things about it that shift to push that agenda more. And then we would catch on to those, and it would be this battle between like the skill of the author, how subtle can they be when they really just want something out of us? You know what I mean? So instead, it speaks to its credit that it isn't trying to be associated with that. It goes with something much more universal, like survival, or reproduction, for example, which is, of course, connected to survival as well. And then, you know, it fuses all that together into this horrifying scenario. And then, like you said, with the Dracula elements, it plays on a lot of things that are indicative of horror tropes, but it does it in kind of a fresh way. So, like, you know, them being trapped on a planet or on a ship, and they're isolated in this confined space. It's like a haunted house, but now the haunted house is a spaceship. So what does that mean? It's like, well, it means that the horrific element probably won't be a ghost. It'll probably be an alien, right? And so you just kind of take that where that logically connects next, right?
Well, it also removes an escape element. Like, you know, with a haunted house, you're on Earth, you can get out into Earth. Well, unless you take it away somehow. Some of those books, you know, will go into that detail. But this one, you know, there is no escape. There's just a vacuum of space outside. So, like, it literally, it gives you something more, I guess, grounded, for lack of a better term, to like fully comprehend that there is no other way than to face your fears, essentially.
Yeah.
Like you have to either face it or, you know, find some other creative method of dealing with it, which she does at the end, but they make it even smaller to do so. Yeah. She tries to escape, and then by doing so just creates a more confined space in which she has to confront this alien and deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
But she still succeeds, and this comes the end of the film. But
and that's you know, it is interesting that she's the one to vocalize, like, she's like, well, that sounds like contamination, so we have to wait 24 hours. That's procedure.
Yeah.
And the captain's like, well, just screw the rules. Like, he needs medical attention. He might die in that time. And she's like, well, if I bring him in here, all of us might die. I don't know what that thing is.
Sure.
And she's absolutely right. Like, that thing kills everybody but her.
That is ironic that she's the only one that survives when she's the one that just said we shouldn't lit it on in the first place. Like, no.
And in fact, the only reason it gets let on is because she says no. That's the end. End of discussion. Sorry, Captain, but I'm in charge now of this particular branch. And it's the android who hits the button to let them in and supersedes that. Because
the one who apparently knows that there's other life and that it needs to be brought back. Its prime directive is bring it back to Earth or whatever.
Right. So if he can remain under the radar, great. But if not, then too bad. And basically, the writing is such that it depicts accurately people in just your standard working class environment. Like they talk at the very beginning, like they just want to get paid. They just want to get home. They want to get paid. It's a hard day's work, and they're done. Right. And the android character is presumably in the same boat as the rest of them until it's revealed later that he has an in with the corporation and that he's not even human. He's like, you know, he's a facade of a human being. So I thought that was really interesting, like the sparseness of the dialogue. It's just enough to keep things going, but it's a very quiet film. And so it's just about people going about the sort of working class everyday scenarios, and then they're hit with something well above what they should ever have to deal with. And then you get to see who's able to like grapple with their senses enough and outwit the monster in time.
Right. Yeah, this era also brought about something I was thinking about, because I went into the documentary and I was listening to some of the stuff that Ridley was saying, or Ridley Scott, and then Geiger himself was on there for a while, and just kind of some of the production designers and stuff and how they were making the film, how they came up with the concept. This is around the same time You have people like George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola. Like these guys are, and to your Vietnam point, like, or this is around the time Apocalypse Now was out, and that is a much more overt political film and like dealing with some of the commentary of something much more realistic, I suppose. It gave you a depiction that you could actually understand that wasn't so allegorical, I guess.
But even that movie's kind of existential, isn't it?
It is, for sure.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, because it's very existential. Like you have to take a step away from the movie Alien, because you're not gonna be thinking about Vietnam when you watch it.
Right.
But like once you take that step, it's like the existential crisis moment. That part makes sense.
Well, even with Apocalypse Now, they hyperfixate in something, and they use it symbolically for sure, but they put it into the environment of Vietnam. So it's kind of like an extra meta commentary. We'll have to watch it and review it at some point. But in that vein, it was kind of talking about similar themes or inspired by similar things potentially. And so you can kind of look at those films from the time and garner some themes. So on this end, I should say, on like the Carpenter and Ridley Scott end, it's very much the fear of the unknown, the like embodiment of that with the extraterrestrial, with an alien that does or is something horrifying, right? So like The Thing would be something with John Carpenter, where it also is very amorphous and very difficult to track, to kill, to understand, but it takes on the form of, the people you know. Mm-hmm. This one kills people you know in order to create something new and something horrifying. So it's interesting to look at the contrast between that and the people like Spielberg and Lucas, who took the sci-fi and the alien element and did something hopeful and filled with wonder. Yeah. Like I think of the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind from Spielberg, and that one has general themes that are similar to like Signs that people would have seen these days. And that one, the aliens come down to Earth in their spaceships, and no one really knows what they are or what they're doing, but they're trying to communicate with them. Yeah. So the whole film is about them trying to communicate. Similar with like Arrival or whatever. The aliens embody something else other than terror, right? It's something to like expand or to explore or whatever. Mm-hmm. I watched this documentary on Star Wars where he was saying something similar about the era, and he's like, "Yeah, if you release Star Wars too early, like before the Vietnam era or something, probably wouldn't make it. Probably just be another campy sci-fi film that would just go straight to TV. You release it after Vietnam, and you have people looking for something hopeful, looking for something that brings back the sense of adventure and the sense of wonder." And that was something that they embodied. And then you look at, this side, and it's like the horror and like trying to embody stuff that people were feeling likely at the time. And, something that they were interpreting from pieces that inspired them, such as Lovecraft or whatever. Mm-hmm. But trying to put that into film and make it so visceral the way that they did. I think that's why it stuck around with people, is that there was so much care. And I remember there's an anecdote. I'm going to let you share this one because I don't know it as well. I just know the like general story. But the chest burster in the film, apparently there was some actual mishaps. Yeah, with the prop.
Okay, so what I heard, which I'm finding now, that I don't think I ever like deliberately went out and researched this movie, but it's just such a talked about film. So I'm just like recanting things other people who love the film and have researched have told me. But yeah, apparently like it was like some balloon or something, and it had like fake blood in there or whatever. And I guess like it wasn't very visible if like you had to like pump it to like fill it up, but you couldn't tell if someone had done it or not. Okay. So like someone came up and thought that somebody else hadn't done it yet, and so they pumped it up. And then somebody else came along and was like, "Oh, I guess this hasn't been done yet." And so then they did it.
And everyone on the crew is just like cranking this thing.
Yeah, it was like nobody was talking to each other. So like when they went in to shoot, they didn't realize like it exploded with such mass that it was more than what anybody thought was going to happen. So the actor's reaction is completely genuine because they did not expect it to be as extreme as it was. And so they were just like, ugh.
From what I understand, to expound on that, is I think, like I said, these are all rumors and I have not verified them. So allegedly, Ridley Scott did not tell the cast and crew that was what was going to happen.
Oh,
so people didn't know that something was going to pop out of his chest. They knew it was something going on because obviously Hurt's like throwing himself around and stuff, and they're responding to a medical emergency. Then he lays down and he's rigged up, and the thing like pops out of his chest, and apparently that reaction is also genuine because no one knew that was actually gonna show up, like popping out of him. Yeah. I imagine it was a series of squibs or something, so it's probably lining his chest, and that's where all the blood. Because they will do that for practical effects. They'll have a little thing that explodes outward with blood.
Wait a minute, so he didn't actually die by this?
But I imagine, he probably had like a lot of it. It might have been like an actual vest or something he had on that they just kept pumping up. Boom!
Yeah.
Hilarious.
But even like you can hear like their reactions too. It seems super genuine where they're just like completely disturbed and grossed out. Yeah. It's a very honest reaction to it.
It is.
And I mean, it's not really, like we made fun of the fact that earlier that why didn't they just, scan him to test to see, what he was.
But no one wants to acknowledge the truth. Like you said, they're not out there for that anyway.
Right.
Because they even go over that. They're like, this isn't part of the job, man. But the android is the one that comes up and he's like, no, it's protocol. If we find some form of life out here, we're obligated to go and check it out.
Right. And he's the science officer. So if anyone is like, well, we need to scan him, it should have been him. But he doesn't because he knows that like, well, I don't want to reveal anything too soon.
I'm supposed to observe and report.
Observe and report, exactly.
It's prime directive.
So you have these people way above their pay grade, not realizing how severe the situation is, and it's like, all right, I guess he's fine. He says he's okay.
Yeah. That part cracked me up. It was like, are you okay? You're okay? Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah. I'm starving. Are you starving? I'm starving. Let's go. Like, does no one want to like sit and maybe talk for a second about what just happened? This thing was wrapped around his face. The thing bled through the hole.
It's acid.
It's like that was on your face, man. Like, talk about it.
Like, anyone. Say something.
It's like that was like a nightmare, and everyone should have been like, no, it wasn't. That was real. It happened. We're all very disturbed. We don't like this. Like, let's maybe hash it out for a minute. Where is it? Does anybody want to talk about that, maybe? Like, where did it go?
Yeah, so it just latches onto your face and then it dies. For no reason?
All right. Yeah, what did it take from you? Like, can we check? Does he have all of his kidneys? This is like a cartel operation. Very, very, what's the word? Elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
But they got what they want.
The other thing I think that's remarkable about this movie that all subsequent Alien movies get wrong is that all the other Alien movies have a xenomorph in them, except for Prometheus. And that's the one movie everybody criticizes for not having a xenomorph. But that was fine.
A xenomorph.
Yeah.
It does.
See, that's my problem with it is that like everybody just wants to see the xenomorph again, and I'm like,
that's what Alien Earth got wrong.
The whole point was that it was such a foreign thing.
Yeah.
Is that you had no concept what this thing was. You saw that movie for the first time. It's like, what is this? What is going on? And then it keeps changing, right? It's like sheds its skin. It's like the process of what it goes through are all these steps that you just wouldn't stop to think about.
Sure.
So the entire movie, viewing it the first time, you're just trying to figure out what is this thing? What is it doing? And if you could just figure out that, it'd be a lot easier to counter. But since you don't know, it makes it that much more imposing as a threat. And so other subsequent Alien things, they're just like, well, let's go back to that thing. And I'm like, well, you should probably come up with something a little bit different because you'd have to replicate something that has like similar steps of evolution that you go through. That would be, because that's in the spirit of what the original did so well. But instead, they're just like more xenomorphs. And it's like,
oh, thanks.
It's not about the xenomorph. That's the surface level interpretation of it.
Right. Yeah, it's the horror that it embodies. It's the, yeah. Anyway, we've discussed that. So I was going to ask one more question.
Okay.
You call this movie disgusting. What is the most disgusting part for you in the movie?
That's a great question. It's like the worst part to endure. I mean, I really don't like the thing on how it latches onto your face. I hate that.
So it's unsettling,
like pulsating and stuff. It's just
breathing
disgusting.
For him. Yes.
It's probably that. It's just so gross. And like the like fingery thing of the face huggers. I hate the face huggers. I hate those things. They're so nasty. Yeah, that's gonna be mine. It's just like the whole like its tail. It's like they just like they thought through every sick thing in the world.
They did.
Like, you know how when you see like a centipede and you're like, oh, it's gross because of this reason. And then you see like a rat or something, you're like, oh, it's gross because of this reason. They just like took everything gross from everything and was like, let's make one entity that's all of those things.
Scorpion tail and
everyone
spider
hates.
arms. Yeah.
How about for you? What's the grossest thing?
That's a great question. Probably.
Oh, you're like, I love the question I asked you.
I know. Yeah, it's great. Thanks for asking. Did you think of that yourself? I
didn't actually.
I liked probably the scene where, because you think the captain gets killed, and then you find out later that he hasn't been. He's like squelched up against the wall, and not only is he still alive, but he's like begging to die, and so he's just like, kill me. I was like, oh. What
did it do?
Yeah, what could it do to get you to beg for death? And then like Ripley's just got to this point where she's not really gonna ask any more questions. She's like, well, he asked, so just torch the guy.
That's what I would have done. It's nasty.
You got it, sir.
It's gonna make another xenomorph like type, xenomorph 2. Like, screw this.
That's fair. Yeah,
I'm just burning it.
Never really know.
Kill it with
she
fire.
nukes the ship anyway, so got rid of that whole thing. But yeah, probably that part because it is pretty visceral, like just the slime and the goo. Yeah. And then he's like all messed up. His face is all beat up, and he's just like can't open his eyes. Oh, ugh. Okay, probably that.
Yeah.
I mean, it has plenty. The other scene that comes to mind, it's not the most gross. I don't know why it comes to mind, but it's the scene where the guy finds the skin, and he like picks up that slimy like bit, and he's just like, what? Ugh. Because it's like a snake molting almost.
Yeah.
But it's grosser because it looks like a giant booger or something, and he's just messing with it. It's gross.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. I was going to say the chest burster scene because that one's like freaks me out because it's so alarming.
It's so surprising. I mean, it's a reason why it's iconic, but I love how the thing, like, they really view in on it. Like, they just get a whole, like, this is what came out, and it's alive. Yep. And then it just takes off. You know where in the ship it is.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, too, adding on to the, like, amorphous point is that it grows so quickly over the course of, like an hour or something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It goes from the thing that pops out of this guy's chest to this giant, dark, gross thing. Because that also has kind of similar elements. It has these weird things like jutting off its back, and it has a scorpion tail, has a second mouth inside of its mouth, and it like plunges into people's face and stuff. Like, they really made sure that this thing was as tactile. Like, this is a Swiss Army knife of horror. It's like, what can this thing do? Like, everything. It's got acid blood, second mouth, big old tail. It can kind of disappear. It can avoid detection. Whatever you want it. It is the number one killer. Everything.
Okay, so we've been on the gross rant for a bit.
Yeah.
So I've got kind of a cool thing from the movie or a funny thing from the movie. Which one do you want?
Let's do the cool and end in a funny. What do you think?
Okay, sounds good. So one cool moment that I really like in this movie is right after that scene or it's in that scene rather, where he picks up the skin and then he drops it. There's a shot where you're looking up at like the rafters, and there's these chains hanging, and then the xenomorph is there too, and it's like swinging back and forth. And at that point, you've not seen it come to full capacity yet.
Sure.
So you don't actually know what it looks like. So, a lot of these horror movies now, it's like they'll do the thing where, especially with the xenomorph, they did it in Alien Earth as well, where it's like it's in the background. But like, what a xenomorph looks like now. So when you see it, you're like, oh, okay, like that's the xenomorph in the background.
Sure.
And if you didn't catch it right away, then you see it move, you're like, okay, well, that's what it is. Whereas in this, it was interesting how it showed you a shot of something you'd never seen before. That was its big reveal, but it wasn't bombastic in any way. It's just like rocking in the rafters. And it's so dark, you can't quite tell, which is a testament to the cinematography, making sure that the lighting was such that you're just seeing like the edges of it. And you're going, wait, what is that? Like, you have just enough time to be like, oh, wait, I think I'm seeing something off there. It wasn't exactly right.
Right.
But you couldn't formulate it in your mind just yet.
Because it is vaguely humanoid, so with enough silhouette, like it looks familiar, but
and it's
wrong.
hanging upside down like a bat, which is not something we do. So you're kind of like, wait, what is that? Yeah.
But it's creepy because you know the situation. So you're like,
yeah,
that's a bad thing.
Maybe that's also a Dracula reference, why it's hanging like a bat like that.
Could be.
So yeah, there might be more parallels to Dracula then.
Potentially, yeah. I imagine these guys had a lot of classical education in general. I mean, obviously you can see the Lovecraft inspiration, and then obviously the Philip K. Dick inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine, like Dracula was just the one that I kind of pulled from, just for the isolationist type thing, and then the singular monster and the fact that he's kind of, because Dracula does that. He changes into bats, or he controls mice, or like he seems like he has a lot of methods that you're not really sure which one he's going to be able to use next.
Yeah.
The plague being one of them. Like, it's just kind of like, oh man, what is this guy not capable of? How do we kill him? What is this?
Yeah.
Same thing here is like, man, if we try and hurt him, he's gonna like erupt into acid, and we're all gonna die. So like, it's yeah. I imagine that's the inspiration, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so what was your what your funny fact?
Well, it's not so much a fact. It's just like a funny moment that every time you watch this moment in the movie, you will no longer see it the same way.
Right. Okay.
Because I was watching it one time, and it's the part where the captain's in like the air ducts and he's trying to find it.
Okay.
Well, when the creature gets revealed, he's like drops down and then he pans around and he shines a flashlight on it, and then it cuts to like a closer shot, and the monster puts out his hands, and then it cuts away. But the moment it does that, it just didn't look very convincing the first time I saw it.
Uh-huh.
And so now every time I see that shot, all I can think of is, come to Papa. So when you watch that,
what the heck?
Just like say
ruined
that phrase,
alien.
it will completely ruin that moment for you. It's so funny because it's obviously like it just looked like a guy in a suit in that moment. That's the one part that that he didn't look that great.
Sure. The hands did look kind of funky at the end when she's in the shuttle and his hand like pops out. I was like, oh, that looks like a glove.
Yeah.
But okay. It's all right.
Yeah.
Limitations of the time, you can forgive.
Do you think this movie like was saved like by concept alone, or do you feel like the effects are enough to hold it up on its own?
I think it's a combination of both, to be fair.
Combination of both, okay.
I think both led to the other for one, but also like there's a lot to be said for both. I mean, it is interesting that they were pushing the boundaries of what conceptual notions were out there already about horror and about aliens, but also like they wanted to be able to make it as visceral as possible in order to achieve the desired effect. I mean, it's not just about the psychological elements. I mean, it's a visual medium, so if they're using all those elements properly, then you can be as effective with the visual as you are with the psychological. And I think that they really tried on both levels, and that deserves commendation, in my opinion.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to the closing?
Do we want to tease what we're doing next week?
No.
Fair enough, then we won't.
Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. So you made it to the end of the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear what you thought.